guys, this is Katie, co-host of Grindhouse Girls podcast. I just want to apologize up front with our first episode because we actually had to cut our intro short because we had a different name picked out originally, and I had searched it and then I researched it afterwards just to make sure we weren't going to have the same name as another podcast. And well, it wasn't exactly the same. There was another podcast that was very similar, and we just wanted to avoid any kind of confusion. So I cut out the part where we mentioned our original name. So it's going to start a little abruptly, but I hope you enjoy it, and we've got more episodes coming, and thanks so much. So, I don't know how to start this, except to say, welcome! It's the first podcast! I'm Katie.
And I'm Brittany.
We went to college together, and we both like scary, spoopy movies. So, that's what we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about two movies. I need to pull up my notes if I can get them. Two movies today called Hereditary and Midsommar, which is how I like to say it. I don't know about you. So I guess I'll go with Hereditary, unless you want to. Which one do you want to explain, Hereditary or Midsommar?
I'll do Midsommar. That's no problem.
Okay, so Hereditary is a story about a family who, it starts out, the matriarch of the family, Toni Collette, is the main, I would say the main character in this movie. Her mother dies, and she had a very weird relationship with her mom. And her mom dies, and it starts out as the family grieving over that. And then another death happens very unexpectedly, and it's probably the craziest part of the entire movie. And slowly the family descends from grief into madness.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is like, can you escape what your family set up for you? And it's kind of an exploration in grief, of grief, of grieving. And I guess now we'll go with spoilers. Basically, like, it starts out, the grandma dies, and you figure out that the grandmother has this, like, group of friends, and they all come to the funeral, but the family doesn't really know them at all. And then the little girl in the family was her favorite child. And then the little girl goes to a party with her brother, and it's not funny, but it's just shockingly funny. She goes to a party. She's allergic to nuts. They set this up early, so it's a great setup and payoff. And the brother doesn't know that she's eaten nuts, and she starts having an allergic reaction. And then she puts her head out of the window when they're trying to drive her to the hospital and gets decapitated. And then after that, it's about grieving over the little girl, and then Toni Collette gets so lost in it that she starts trying to talk to her daughter, and through a seance, and accidentally welcomes a demon, I guess we would call it.
He's kind of like, and kind of like ancient texts. Paimon is like Satan's right-hand man, essentially.
Okay, I was reading up on it, like, some people say he's the 9th spirit of hell, some people say the 6th, and some people say the 3rd. Yeah. He's always wearing a crown, though. Mm-hmm. So, and it's like Iranian and Persian originally, is what it said on Wikipedia, because, everybody loves Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. But basically, the grandmother has set up this entire family to sacrifice themselves so that one of them can be inhabited by Paimon. And the little girl is the one that is Paimon, but apparently Paimon likes a boy's body and not a girl's body. So they have to decapitate the little girl, and then her spirit, basically they kill the dad and the son, and then the spirit of the little girl inhabits her brother's body and then becomes Paimon. I think the ending's kind of a little open-ended. There's a lot of naked people.
what it is that so and there's all these great things where, you know, when you first see if you were to go into this movie blinded, you would really think the idea of the Hereditary would be like Annie, who is Toni Collette's character, is afraid of inheriting some of the issues that she like. It's very early explained on that, you know, they believe her mother was bipolar. And then
her brother committed suicide.
Yeah, because
dad starved himself to death.
Yeah, and the brother, it's very interesting. It's kind of like if you watch the movie the first time, you think of it as like a throwaway line. If you watch the movie a second or third time, you're like, oh shit, it's all right there. The brother killed himself because he believed his mom was putting people in him.
Which she was.
Yes.
Which, the second time I watched that movie, I was like, oh shit, he was the first like one.
And so and Annie mentions in the group therapy, she's like, you know, she didn't want to be a mom, which I feel like and she says she doesn't want to be a mom, and she was like, so when I had my son, I kept my mother away from him, but by the time I had my daughter, I'm in the relationship, so she essentially stuck her talons in Charlie, the daughter. But you feel like twice. So what it was originally was her son that Paimon was supposed to be into, and then maybe Peter when Peter was a small child, but she didn't get the opportunity, so Charlie became the vessel. But of course, so it's just
Paimon doesn't like girl bodies for some reason. So
I guess he identifies as a masculine spirit.
Right. I didn't know. I knew it was going to be a scary movie, but I didn't go into it knowing about. I kept myself very blind because I saw the promotion for it. I was going to go see A Quiet Place, which is pretty good. I'm not interested in seeing A Quiet Place 2 personally, but the first one was pretty good. But I was going to see that movie, and the Hereditary trailer came on, and I was like, oh my god, what is this movie? It looks so good. It looks so scary, because they do the whole, like, they keep popping. Yeah. And I was like, what is up with that noise? What's going on? Which is honestly a pretty minor part of the movie, except to signify, they do use it to signify when the little girl when Charlie takes over Peter's body. He goes... And you're like, oh no, which I didn't notice the first time I watched it. I ended up rewatching it before we did this review because I had seen it months ago. Also, by the way, there's a part, well, I guess I shouldn't go into this yet. I'll go into it later, but there was a part that I didn't realize where the framing until I rewatched it. And I guess it was just it stuck out so much in my head that I thought it was a much weirder scene than it was. Anyways, but I kept myself in the dark. I didn't watch any reviews. I didn't watch, except I would watch the beginning of reviews, oh, this movie's good. And then when they started talking about it, I was like, nope, turning it off. I really want to see it for myself. And it did not disappoint. I personally thought Toni Collette should have been nominated for an Oscar for her performance.
Because she is a powerhouse in this movie.
She's tour de force. I love her. Always loved Toni Collette since, honestly, since Little Miss Sunshine. Oh. But for that.
And I go back to The Sixth Sense. I saw The Sixth Sense in theaters with my parents and my brother when I was 10 years old. And I always think of her in Sixth Sense as Cole's mom and how great she was in that movie.
I didn't see The Sixth Sense when it was out. I saw it when I was older because my parents are I think I was the kind of kid, I like scary movies now, but when I was little, I wouldn't sleep if I saw a scary movie, but I'd want to watch it. My parents are like, you don't need to watch this movie right now. But I saw About a Boy, which I don't know if you've seen About a Boy. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Also, one of the best soundtracks of all time. The same person did all the songs for it, and it is the most it's so listenable, and it's such a good soundtrack. By Badly Drawn Boy is the artist, the musician that does the soundtrack for it. I love it. But she's in that, and she plays a daft fucking hippie, to quote Hugh Grant's character. Yeah. And she's really good in it, and she plays a person that has a lot of mental health issues in that movie too. And that's why I like Nicholas Hoult. It's the whole reason I watched what is that? It ended up not being that good, but that movie Warm Heart, the zombie movie.
Yeah, it's like a Romeo and Juliet but zombie movie.
I bought it at Second and Charles because I went to see it, and it was okay. It probably wasn't worth my money, but I like Nicholas Hoult because he was really, really good in About a Boy when he was like 12. Yeah. I was like the same age. I think I'm the same age as him, maybe like a couple years older. So like I was like, oh my god, it's the kid from About a Boy. But so I have watched About a Boy probably 20 times, if not more. Likes it. Like it's a movie that played a lot in our house. But so I was like, Toni Collette, she's so good in this movie. And I think there's a problem in Hollywood with horror movies. There's very few horror movies, and I'm trying to say horror because I was taught to say horror in college. But it's not horror because it sounds like horror. I don't know if you remember telling you that, but I remember like my first class was like, it's not horror, it's a horror, it's horror. It's a horror movie. I say it weird. But horror movies get kind of ignored when it comes to award season.
I feel like with this movie is very interesting because the marketing for it was very misleading, and I feel very blessed. I got to see this movie on opening night at our local theater. We saw this movie in Alabama, and of course Alabama isn't.
Hey again, it's voiceover Katie. I just wanted to pop in and say, unfortunately, Brittany's side of Skype kept cutting her off, so it cut off here, and she was trying to explain, I think, that we live in Alabama. We live in a larger city in Alabama, and sometimes we don't always get independent movies or movies that most cinema fans would like, or you have to travel to go see them. But she was able to see this movie the weekend it opened in Alabama. Okay, back to the podcast.
But I think there was a lot of murmuring in the theater because I think people went into this movie and with this true idea of it was going to be a horror movie, and you also thought Charlie was going to be the lead character because they really play her up in the trailers. And then she's decapitated in the first half hour of the movie.
Yeah, that's the best. Yeah. Not the best part of the movie, but it's the best part of the plot because you're like, okay, what is this little girl going to do next? Oh my god, what's going to happen? And then it's just head off and you're just like, what happened? What is going on?
I remember very vividly sitting in this theater, and this movie is a slow burn. When you think of the term slow burn, Hereditary is the movie that comes to mind because it's an amazing movie, but it's a lot of dialogue, it's a lot of family drama, getting to that last 15 minutes. And I remember the last 15 minutes, spoiler alert, Toni Collette is on the ceiling. She's crawling around and she's possessed. Yeah. And I remember a guy go, what the fuck?
I mean, because who wasn't thinking that? Because I remember I was like, is that because they do it very well because they don't make it's in the background.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, I think the most visually cool part of it is before she's actually on the ceiling, Peter wakes up and he's kind of in a dreamlike state.
Yes.
And he like woke up from a nightmare and you see her crawling like through the air. Like she's not even on something, but she's crawling like through the, what the hell is going on? And you're like, you're not sure if he's still having a dream or not. And then, and this was the part I was going to talk about before, but she eventually is like on the ceiling taking her own head off. And for some reason, I thought that entire scene took place at a close-up of her, and it really doesn't. But that scene was so like ingrained in my brain that when I went to watch it, I was like, where's the close-up? And I was like, okay, it never happened. My brain made it up. But it was like, it's pretty horrific, but it's like, it's pretty earned because it is a slow burn. And it does shock you at the end because it's such a realistic beginning and everything's played so straight. But really the best horror movies are because, and forgive me, because possession things freak me out.
Yeah.
I'm going to be real honest. I have watched the beginning of The Exorcist several times and never finished the whole thing because I don't like that stuff. I grew up Roman Catholic. I have socially I have problems with how the Catholic Church is run, but it still runs deep in like my religiousness. Like, I like my faith, but I don't like how it's run right now because there's a bunch of problems. But like, exorcisms are a real thing in Catholicism. Yeah. And my mom, who is a nurse and who is extremely level-headed, totally like thinks it's a possibility, and that has always freaked me out. So this goes to places that I didn't expect it was going to go to, and I was like, oh, but for some reason I could handle it because it started really, really normal. But The Exorcist is one of those movies where it's not played like a horror movie, it's acted like a drama that happens to have horror elements. Well, and I think that's why this is good.
What I like about Hereditary, too, is the rewatchability factor it has to it. So I think the first time you watch the movie, and especially if you go into it kind of blind, like no one spoiled anything for you, it's a real shock to the senses. But if you go back and watch it, and Midsommar is this way, too. When you go back and watch it a second or third time, there's all these little rewarding details that really you catch on. So I even there's a moment in the film where you don't realize it, but you see the Mel come in, and there's like a it's like something like a psychic, like, thing. So in other words, the cult was trying to get Annie for the Mel first before they had Joan approach her at the therapy meeting. So it's just like stuff like that. That's really, really cool to rewatch it. And when we go back to the beheading scene, the thing that sticks with me about that scene is, and it's not so. You're going to think this is probably so weird. So after Peter jumps out the window, you see his body, and you hear the thud of the head. You hear the thud of the head hit the ground after she's decapitated herself. And I think that's the most chilling thing. Every time I watch that scene, I get cold chills.
Oh, yeah.
Just hearing it.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. Because I didn't notice it the first time I watched it, but the second time I watched it, I was like, oh, and her body hit the floor. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit. Okay, so the car decapitation scene, I feel like I found this either on Wikipedia or IMDb, but it's actually based on a real life event in Marietta, Georgia in 2005, where a man accidentally decapitated his friend while they were driving home, and like his friend was intoxicated and stuck his head out the window, and he accidentally decapitated him, and then he actually did drive home with the headless corpse. And like he fell asleep in the car, and somebody with their 2-year-old found the body.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh my God, like, oh shit. I can see that happening though, because he's just like, so he's in shock, and he just drives home. That's probably the worst part of the whole decapitation scene of the little girl. Is like, one, a little girl just got decapitated, but two, like I guess he's in shock, but I guess you can't save someone if they've already been decapitated. Yeah. So I guess you just he just drives home, but he doesn't wake up his parents. He just goes to bed.
Yeah.
And then his mom finds it, and it's horrific. And then you see like the little girl's head, and there's all these ants crawling all over. It's awful.
Yeah. And I think that was that screenshot of, you can hear Annie's wailing in the distance, but you're seeing Charlie's severed head. And that was just, I mean, there's so much brilliance to this movie. I was even thinking about the opening shot, because the opening shot, when I watched it for our third time, it really encapsulates. So, Annie, and of course, Katie, this scene, the movie, but Annie is a doll maker, a miniature maker, and she's like an artist. Yeah, she's like a miniature artist, and you get the feeling, like on multiple rewatches, you're like, okay, like it gives her control over things. She doesn't have any control in her life, and I think this is the real tragedy of this movie, is that these people are born to be vessels and to be sacrifices for this god. Like, this is what they're born for. That is the Hereditary. So she makes these miniatures to try to have control over her life. And you even see the scene, she details the decapitation scene. She has no control over that event, but it gives her control over that event. And I think these like little brilliant details that it's such a wonderful movie, but it's such a turnoff for people too.
Well, and they use it for a really good framing device, because it starts off as a miniature of her house, and then it goes into the actual scene, and it's very seamless. And then like they use it to transition scenes, and it ends with a miniature version of what's actually happening. Yeah. It's very cool. Like he uses it from start to finish, and I think it's a nice framing device, and it's a cool visual. Like visually, it's very cool. But yeah, I felt really bad for, like, it's kind of it, on the surface level, it's you can't escape being the vessel your mom, because her mom leaves her a note that says, like, the note was the creepiest, like, oh, it's gonna be, I'm so sorry for all the grief you're gonna go through, but it's gonna be worth it, sweetie. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, what the hell does that mean? I mean, and she doesn't know, like, she didn't tell
Yeah.
anybody about this.
Well,
And then it turns into, like, can I escape my genetics? Can I escape mental illness? Like, there's a bigger picture than just, can these specific people escape this fate? But it's also, can we escape genetics? Can we escape our hereditary traits? And sometimes you can't.
Yeah, and I think that's the real underlying tragedy, is that you can't, like, you can, and that's where you feel Annie's struggle the entire movie, is that she is trying to fight, and it echoes back because she has the conversation where the paint thinner, which I think is one of the most memorable scenes in the movie too.
Oh yeah.
She talks about she sleepwalks, and she woke up one night and she had doused her children in paint thinner and she had lit the match. And she's like, I was sleepwalking. But when she has the dream about confronting Peter about how she never wanted to be a mom, she imagines herself being in that paint thinner. So you see where there was action she almost took in their lives just to get out of this, what would eventually happen with him being the vessel and her being a sacrifice. There was all these little things leading up to, and that's, I think, once again, it's almost Shakespearean in a way, or almost maybe like a Greek tragedy. There was no way for her to get out of it. She was just on this track, and there was no getting off of it. And I mean, that's really sad when you think about it.
I think the saddest part is, speaking of Greek tragedies, the scene with her husband. So her husband's name is Steve, which I feel bad for Steve. He's played by Gabriel Byrne, who I love Gabriel Byrne ever since I saw the Winona Ryder Little Women. I've watched that movie a zillion. It's one of my favorite movies ever. But he plays the professor in that, and Gabriel Byrne is one of those people that he always gives a solid performance, but I don't always, like, I feel like I don't see him for years doing a movie, and then he just pops up in a movie. And I'm like, oh, awesome. I love him. I didn't even know he was in this movie until I started watching it. I was like, oh, it's the guy from Little Women. Cool. But his character, so there's a scene with her and him, and she's trying to destroy a notebook. I can't remember if it was her mom's notebook or her notebook. I think it was a notebook where she was trying to communicate with Charlie through a thing.
It's Charlie's sketchbook.
That's what it is, yes. So she's trying to destroy it, and every time she tries to burn it, she lights on fire, and so she stops doing it. She asks him to do it, and this is another weird thing. So her husband is her psychologist, or is a psychologist, and I think it's implied, or they might actually say it, I can't remember specifically, but he was her psychologist, and then they got married. So, which is kind of weird, because that's never, like, a good thing when you're married to your psychologist. You're not really supposed to treat your own family members. But so that's one thing. But she is trying to sacrifice herself, because she thinks if she burns this notebook, she'll sacrifice herself and will save her family, Peter and Steve. And Steve is like, you've gone effing crazy. Yeah. And then you get this, this is a good setup. He gets this call about her mom's tomb being desecrated, but they don't give you all the details, and he just doesn't tell her anything because he doesn't want to upset her. And then he's like, well, I don't want to tell you, but are you the one that dug up your mom's corpse? And, like, because he thinks it's hers. He thinks that she's just completely snapped. And so, but she begs him to burn the book, and she thinks that she's gonna save her family if he burns the book, because she'll burn up and then it'll be over. But instead, she gets him to burn the book, and he lights on fire. Oh no, she throws it in the fire. I'm sorry, she throws it in the fire, and then it burns him alive. Yeah. So they've sacrificed, which is another weird thing, because why did all the women technically, not all the women, but, like, the men died, and all the spirits of the women kind of lived on. I guess Toni Collette and the mom didn't, but Like, Charlie's the one that survives, technically, spiritually, even though Peter's body survives. But I'm pretty sure we can agree that Peter's gone.
Yeah.
Spiritually.
Peter, I think, is dead, and then Charlie's host is literally in him, for sure.
Yeah. Which is weird, because I was kind of confused why. So if the spirit... It's very confusing. It's a little confusing. I'm kind of glad they didn't over-explain it. They explained it a little bit, but they didn't over-explain it. But so Payman is I guess possessing Charlie from day one. I'm guessing, but he doesn't like the body he's in.
Exactly.
But then Charlie possesses Peter. So I'm like, so is it Payman or is it Charlie, or is Payman just like kind of hanging out in the back of Charlie's psyche, and they're kind of sharing?
I think that's.
Or has there never been a Charlie? I think
you've hit the nail on the head, where like Payman has always been a part of Charlie, and maybe Charlie hasn't fully understood it. But I think Payman and Charlie are essentially one and the same, and that's why Charlie is a little weird. Like why she feels like she can cut a bird's head off with a pair of scissors, or why why there's like a there's some, and of course we as the audience think it's some kind of like mental thing, like maybe she's just not all there, but no, it's a demon's been inhabiting her body probably her whole life. So
which and this may be because I got really into dissociative identity disorder recently, because Anthony Padilla did a YouTube video about it. I understand it more, but I went down a rabbit hole lately of DID, where it makes sense now. At first I was like, I don't understand this disorder at all, like, but anyways, but traumatic events make people with DID create alters or alternate personalities to take over for them when they go through a traumatic event. So a lot of times it's like sexual trauma and stuff like that. So like you'll have amnesia. So I wonder, is the Charlie Payman thing like DID? Like, is it like he's a back alternate? Because she is pretty young. She's like 8, right? I think she's like 8, maybe 10.
I think she's meant to be like 13 or 14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if they even gave her age, honestly. But so, what I was saying was like, because maybe it's just because I've been really into researching DID, because basically there's a YouTuber that, I don't want to say somebody's pretending they have a mental disorder or a mental health issue, but she like it happened like 2 days after this video came out, where this other YouTuber was interviewing people that actually have DID and are diagnosed by a psychologist with it. And then all of a sudden she's like an attention getter kind of YouTuber, and she was like, I have multiple personalities. She's like, I have both. And it's like, but it's not both, they just renamed it. You can't have both. You can have, it's the same thing. Anyways, I wonder if it's like that. Like maybe Charlie would have amnesia when Payman took over. And then that could be a whole thing where it is a mental illness and it's not anything supernatural. So, but I mean, I think they imply there's this weird light flare that they do throughout the movie,
and that's
when bad things happen.
Yeah.
So, which they also use, which I want to talk about this movie in a different episode, but in Suspiria, they do the same thing during a specific part when they cast a spell.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's like very like natural looking, like it's like a lens flare kind of thing. Like it could happen in real life and probably just be like, oh, what was that weird light? But like, it's just like the hint of supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
But
I believe the light flare is Payman, and the reason I say that is because when Peter jumps and you see his body on the ground, you see the light flare go over and then it dissolves into him, which makes me believe that's Payman just hanging around waiting for his chance to get in there. So,
which is sad. I feel really sad for Peter.
Yeah.
Also, like, how is he going to explain all the headless people to like the police? I guess he has a whole cult to clean it up for him.
Yeah.
And that was another thing I was looking up. Have a scene where he's in class, like the first scene he's in class, they're talking about Heracles, which is also Hercules, same person, but Greek and Roman mythology, they would rename gods. So Heracles is Hercules, but Heracles I think is the Greek name for Hercules, I want to say, and Hercules is the Roman name. But they're talking about, I don't even know which play they were talking about. I couldn't figure out exactly which one, but some Greek tragedy or Roman tragedy about Heracles. And there apparently was some kind of Heracles cult in ancient Rome or ancient Greece. And he's like, you know, if you think of Hercules, he's like a very masculine Greek hero. And also in like, I mean, obviously not the Disney version, but in the like Greek tragedy, he killed his children with Megara, his first wife. So like,
that is correct. Yeah.
There's a lot of levels in there. I'm like, oh my god, all the kids both die, and then also like it's a masculine thing. The whole reason that they're killing all these people is because Payman wants Peter's body and not Charlie's body.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole thing where they have to decapitate three generations of one family. So I wonder if that was like an honorable win for that lady, like the grandma, or if it was like you got the short straw.
No, it really was an honorable win, because in that last scene, you even see her referred to as Queen Ellen. Like it's like they have it as like queen, and like you see the pictures, the Polaroids, and they're like showering her in what looks like gold coins. So I mean, no, these people revered Ellen, the grandmother, as like their queen of their cult because of what she was giving up to let the cult thrive, essentially.
So I wonder why they let her die a natural death and then decapitated her and then killed everybody else. I was like, could you not just? I guess he just didn't want to wait. I don't know. I don't understand pagan cults. I find them very interesting, and I mean, I get it. Like Catholicism's kind of weird. So I mean, it's very weird religion. So I understand if people find my religion weird, so I don't want to like religion shame on anyone, but I think whenever you have to decapitate people physically in real life, that may be a reason to maybe not belong to that religion. I mean, I'm just saying, like, might be too far.
But you know, and that's the thing though, it's like if the cult's ancient, since the beginning of time we've seen different cults that would sacrifice, and that's just something that came with the territory. Now we're a modern civilized society. It seems very barbaric, but just thousands of years ago it wasn't considered barbaric at all. It was considered natural for crops to grow even.
True, which I think would be a great segue into Midsommar.
Oh yeah,
because that's like the same thing. So what are we gonna rate Hereditary? D for Decapitation?
Yeah, Hereditary is D for Decapitation and S for Slow Burn. And
I would call the acting definitely Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
For sure. I don't know if it's quite a Daniel Day-Lewis because it definitely didn't. I still don't understand why this movie didn't get nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
At least for performance. Like, I find it very annoying that they didn't nominate them because she's just, I don't know, Toni Collette just gives a tour de force. And honestly, both of the kids do a pretty good performance too, which it's always hard to find kids that are good performers. But I would say the gore is pretty intense in this movie.
Yeah. And I do want to bring it up because me and my husband actually got into a heated debate over what movie is gorier, and is it Midsommar or is it Hereditary? And I actually posed this question on Facebook. I feel like Hereditary is my answer, but it seems like the overwhelming answer is actually Midsommar from the general public's point of view.
So unfortunately, right here is where both I got a phone call and Skype decided to stop recording for us. So here we are back again.
We might be interrupted because it kept closing. We're finally just we were trying to record video and audio, but apparently Skype doesn't want to work with the video because probably everybody's Skyping with their relatives because everybody's separated right now, which it's a sucky time, but isn't it a great time to talk about horror movies?
It is, which is gonna bring us back into Midsommar. Midsommar. So
talking about isolation and isolated people.
Yes, and Midsommar is of course Ari Aster's sophomore debut, and it is incredible. To give basic synopsis of the story, there is a young woman named Danny. She suffers from anxiety and panic attacks. And very early in the movie, her sister commits suicide and kills their parents along with her. So Danny loses her entire family, pretty much within the first 7 minutes in the movie. So she's recovering from that, and she has a boyfriend named Christian, and very early on in the movie, Christian is just kind of like, yeah, I don't think this is working out with me and Danny, blah, 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 blah. He's basically a fuckboy, and I'm sorry, there's probably going to be people who have conflicting opinions of that. But no, I feel like,
call him a fuckboy.
Yeah. And so he kind of believes he's being the nice guy, and he stays with Danny because, of course, who would want to be that person that breaks up with their significant other after their whole family is killed? But he is an anthropology major, and so they decide that they're going to this festival, and he doesn't initially tell Danny about it, but then when she finds out, she's understandably upset because he didn't even tell her, and so he pity invites her.
Also, it's happening during her birthday.
Yes, and so he pity invites her to go, and so she goes, and that's the film. Basically, they go to this festival. And it's I believe it's in Sweden, right? That's where the movie's taking place? Okay.
Yeah, that's where it's based in Sweden, but actually apparently they filmed in Hungary.
Huh.
Ironic, because I guess it's probably cheaper. I mean, I don't know about Sweden. But apparently it was cheaper, but they filmed it in Hungary. So at least they were still like in Europe, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, and they're supposed to be in New York, apparently. I didn't really get the feeling that they were in New York, but I thought. But apparently they're supposed to be in New York City, and her parents are supposed to be in Minnesota. And yeah, I know. I was like, okay, but they filmed all the American stuff in Utah, which I was like, yeah, that looks like Utah. I mean, maybe I've seen a couple too many episodes of Sister Wives or something. But I was like, yeah, that looks like Utah. That doesn't look like Minnesota. But
I guess
you do what you can.
You see those opening scenes, and everything is because it's snowing, and I guess maybe that's why I didn't associate it with New York, but I can see it too, just because of the apartments and how they're set up and everything. But yeah, they go to this festival, and that's where the movie really kicks off. Is that they're at this festival, and weird shit starts to happen because it's a pagan cult. So.
Yeah, like it's very, the thing about this movie is first of all, there is a tapestry at the beginning of the movie before anything else happens that tells you exactly what the movie is going to be like, and tells you basically the whole plot line.
Yes.
And there's so many like wordplay things, like for instance, they'll say something and it sounds like an offhand like joke, but then that will actually happen to somebody later on the movie, and you're like, what the fuck? That's so twisted. It's like stuff you would say, like, that everyone's like, haha, like, oh, don't kill yourself over something, or, something that someone would make an offhand, like, over-exaggerated comment, but no, that's actually what's going to happen. Like, I think the best one I found, not the best, but there's a guy called Mark. So there's Christian, and he has a friend. Oh, what is his name? I can't remember his name. His friend who's the anthropology major with him, who there's him and another guy are kind of competing anthropology majors. They both want to go for their masters, and they're trying to pick their project for their thesis. And one has already picked Midsommar Rituals, and Christian kind of like piggybacks onto that because he's unoriginal. And then they have a friend, Mark, who's like a total dick, and Mark is just like the comic relief the whole time. But they go to the festival, and there's all these kids, and they're like running around, and he's like, oh, what are they playing? And their friend Pele, who's the guy that brings them all over there, is like, oh, they're playing Skin the Fool. And then he actually gets skinned alive because he's a fool. And I was like, oh my God, like all of this stuff is set up and like paid off really well.
I don't know if you heard this theory, which fascinates me because when we think about if we're going to compare and contrast Hereditary and Midsommar, we think of these women being on this trajectory towards their fates, and there's a lot of people because of Pile's relationship with Danny and some of the things he says to Danny, like especially the mention he has of her. He talks to her, and he's kind of the one I think that invites her a little bit, like, oh, blah 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 blah. And
he's like, I'm so glad you're coming.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a lot of people that believe that maybe this whole thing with her family and her sister was set up by the cult. I'm not sure if I believe that.
I don't really think that personally, because I don't think it doesn't seem okay. Because here's the thing about their ritual. So the whole thing revolves around the number 9. So they have a midsummer festival every single year, but only every 90 years do they do this specific one, and they sacrifice 9 people. The gods, they don't really say a specific god. I don't think. It's just they do say a couple gods, but like it's more of like I feel like it's more of a polytheistic kind of thing than a monotheistic. It's more like Mother Earth and Father Time or whatever. They don't say that, but like more of like that kind of feeling, like more of nature than like a single god. But there's like 9 people they're gonna sacrifice, and some of them volunteer, and they do bring outsiders. But then also some of them, like, they don't have to kill all the outsiders. They do end up, spoiler alert, they do end up killing all the outsiders but Danny, but they don't have to because she chooses the last person. So, like, it doesn't seem like Hereditary seemed like it was perfectly set up. This was going to happen to them all along. This seems more of a choice on her part. And I think the 3 guys were always meant to be sacrifices. The couple, there's another couple. So the weird thing is, I don't know, I was watching it for the second time and I was kind of confused because so they go to their first stop when they get, and it's like this big field before they actually get to the village, and everyone takes a bunch of psychedelic mushrooms and they go on a trip together. And there's a lot of young people, and I thought when I first started watching it, there's four people, right? Danny and the 3 guys are brought by Pele from America, and then there's another British couple that's brought by his best friend, which I cannot remember his name. It was like Olka or Old. It was something something extremely Swedish. Pele I can remember, but the other is like Ulf or Ulfa. I'm sorry, I'm not Swedish and I don't understand Swedish names. I'm sorry. But there's one of his best friends growing up has this British couple that he brings too. But then it looked like there were a bunch of other people coming, like they had brought other outsiders. But then towards the end of the movie, they don't like name any other outsiders. So either people left, people escape, or were they just all, those were the only outsiders they brought in, only those 6 people.
And I thought it was only those 6. I could be wrong, but I thought it was just like, like Pele had brought the 5 of them, and then he had brought the 2 of them. And they're like brothers. They're not like biologically related, but they're brothers within the cult, I guess, because they were raised together. But I think that's was just that
thing.
Yeah.
Because the cult is very pleasant. Like everyone's really nice. It's unlike Hereditary, where they seem nice and then you're like, oh shit, these people are crazy. These people, even towards the end, like they seem so sweet, and you're like, why are they like? I get why they're doing this because it's a very age-old tradition, and it's worked apparently the last couple thousand years or whatever. But I'm like, I don't know how these people are so nice and they're just sacrificing people. But I do want to talk about the first scene because to me, I think it's maybe the most powerful, and I think that's why people think, I don't know, a lot of people think Hereditary is more shocking than Midsommar, even though Midsommar was advertised as being more shocking. But Midsommar starts off with a very graphic scene of death because they show you her parents and her sister, like their dead bodies and stuff. And I will say, Florence Pugh is maybe one of the best ugly criers in the business. That girl knows how to realistically cry, which a lot of actors don't nowadays. A lot of people just put some drops in their eyes. They're like, oh, I'm crying. But man, that girl, you can feel the pain through the screen.
Yeah.
Like, she is a great wailer. I was like, this is how I cry when I'm upset. Like, she's just got those like those heaving, just like
Yeah.
I can't even breathe or talk. And she's really, I don't know what she had to tune into to do that, because that is some heaviness.
Well, it brought up the first scene too, and you know, that's something that Ari plays a lot with, subconscious imagery, where you see her sister's face multiple times in that kind of deaf state throughout the movie. It's hidden in the trees. So, I mean, you really, I always tell people who have seen Midsommar and Hereditary, and you can disagree with me, but I feel like Midsommar is a lot more like a fairy tale. In a lot of ways. Like, it's very fairy tale, and especially the ending is very fairy tale, but you see that grief and that trauma follow Danny throughout the whole movie.
And
before she lets it
go. She's ironically a psychology major. So she's like studying that, and she's going through her own psychology. And I mean, like, I don't think it was planned to go back to that point, but I do think Pele, or however you say his name. I'm sorry, I'm not Swedish. Please don't come for me, Swedish people. Very sorry. I love PewDiePie. It's fine. I don't understand. Oh, wait, what was I trying to say? I completely lost my train of thought. Oh, so I don't think it was planned, but I think when Pele heard about what happened to her parents, he understood that he could manipulate her, because he also lost his parents. So he's like, I know what it's, and basically like Pele, and I don't know if his parents got murdered by the cult, or if he says they got burnt up.
Yes. Think about it. They burned them at the, well, no, well, that's the thing about the cult every 90 years is that the same, because I was wondering if his parents were sacrificed in a similar way.
Maybe they only do 9 people. Maybe they only bring outsiders every 90 years, but maybe they still burn people every Midsommar. I don't know. Yeah. But his parents die in a fire. Mm-hmm. That's all he says. And you're like, at the end, you're like, oh, because they burn all the sacrifices alive, and some of them are dead already, but some of them are alive. And I was like, what the hell? Like, but anyways, but he's like, I lost my parents too. I understand. So he already knows that, because he's friends with her boyfriend. So he already knows that her boyfriend isn't a great boyfriend to her, and is just waiting for the opportunity to like break up with her. Almost said murder her. That was, but break up with her. And, so I think he understands that he can very easily take advantage of her fragile mental state. Now, her sister was already bipolar, so I don't really want to say, I don't think it's implied that the cult was like, yeah, you should kill yourself and your parents. I think that was a lucky coincidence, because I think he was always going to bring the boys, but the May Queen is chosen kind of at random. I don't think it would have been anything. I think he was going to sacrifice himself with his brother if he hadn't won the May Queen, because that's the whole thing. Yeah. Danny ends up becoming the May Queen and accepted into this family of murderers, but family.
Yeah, and he's attracted to her too, because right after she becomes that May Queen, he kisses her, and it's like, he like grabs her and kisses her. So I think like in that moment he is like, oh yeah, like, you know, this is happening, and it really gives Danny the family that I think she essentially lost. It's like her regaining her family. And I mean, at the end of the movie, she even almost has like this glow to her. Yeah. It's like very that interesting. The way it looks
cool.
Yeah,
that flower outfit is cool, but looked really uncomfortable.
Yeah, all the because they wanted to have a cult film, all these costumes were actually handmade. Which is really,
she still has that dress, by the way. I saw she made a bunch of, I can't remember if it was Snapchat or Instagram messages, but I saw it on YouTube. She still has it for Halloween this year, And she was like making a really silly video of her in that costume, which I was like, that's cool that they let her keep that. Her the May Queen dress, not the flower dress, but when she dances the dance.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know, I have a weird kind of respect for this culture because they seem to be really nice people. They take care of orphans. It's very commune-like, but it also teaches you not to trust communes because, like, the Manson family was a commune too. Yeah, they all took care of each other, and then they murdered a bunch of people in cold blood. So, like, I don't know. I never trust people that seem too nice, personally.
Yeah.
But it is like they seem like if you have to be in a pagan cult, they seem like the pagan cult to be in. Yeah. Because they are very sweet people and they're very welcoming, and they all, I don't know, I feel like maybe Pele was like texted everybody before he got there, was like, hey, I got our new May Queen because this girl's cool, because everyone's like, I'm so like when they meet the older guy, like there's two heads, like two elders, there's a female and a male, and the male guy greets them all when they come in, and he, like, when he says, I'm so happy you guys are here, he looks dead in the eye to Danny and basically ignores everybody for a second. And he's like, oh, I mean, you guys too. And it's like, oh, okay. They all really like her. So, yeah. I don't know. I guess it could be a setup, but I didn't really get that feeling.
I even think when we're thinking about this cult in a sense of community is when she finds out Christian cheated on her, which is the one thing I will say about Christian. I know there is some arguments about this scene. Yeah, that the whole movie he's attracted to the redhead girl, but they did drug him essentially.
He got date raped, y'all.
Yeah, which is what I feel like too, because I was like, yeah, sure, he's been attracted to her, but the actual scene where there's the mating fertility ritual, he was drugged before that. So I do feel like he was essentially raped. Yeah. And so yeah, he in Danny's eyes, it may have been he was cheating, but that's not actually what was going on in the scene. But I go back to that scene with Danny when she's like, she throws up and she has such this visceral reaction. She's so upset and she's sobbing. And the women try to share in that anguish with her. They all start sobbing. So you really feel like the cult itself, it even shares the emotions, like, of what the other members are going through.
We're recording again. Sorry, we got a snafu again. I definitely think Christian was date raped. I mean, I do think he does make the conscious choice to take the drugs.
Yeah.
And she literally says, you will have no inhibitions. And he's like, sure. So, I mean, I definitely think, yes, he made a conscious choice to give in to the possibility of cheating on his girlfriend. But also, you know, he may have changed his mind if he hadn't been on drugs, too.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was about to say, and I think part of it is also, I feel like it was his ambition to try to assimilate with the cult too, that he was like, oh yeah, sure, like, if this is what you do, I'll do it, cool, like, you know. Yeah. And I think that was another very big, it was a very big mess up on his part, because of course everything that he did eventually led to him getting killed too.
Which they did give her a choice. Basically, they have 8 people already chosen for the final sacrifice at the end, and then Danny ends up winning the dance competition, which that seemed a little fishy because I still don't understand how she won, but she ended up winning the dance competition to be the May Queen, and she's also taken drugs, by the way.
Yeah.
Willingly, but still, she's also on drugs. And so they basically, like, separate her from her boyfriend and then have her boyfriend have sex with this redheaded girl that's been flirting with him the whole time, who's apparently 15 or 16, which is kind of gross.
Yeah.
Because he's definitely in college. And she sees him, and they're like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like, I feel like they wanted her to see it because the girl that's her friend who befriends her is like, oh, don't look at it. No, you don't want to see that. But she doesn't really stop her. And so then they all kind of, like, she's, like, grieving, which is kind of, like, she's been trying to hold in her grief the whole movie. Like, there's a scene, she's on the plane, and she's starting to cry, and she keeps leaving every time she starts grieving about her family. And it's like, I don't know if you've ever gone through a grieving period, but it's when you can grieve in front of somebody and them not judge you, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, like, grief, bad things happen at the worst timing, you know.
Yeah.
So like she keeps like starting to have a panic attack, starting to like she hasn't really let go of her grief because she keeps like going into the bathroom and she doesn't like express it in front of anyone. So these girls all start like grieving with her and they all start imitating her breathing and her crying.
That was the scene I was talking about, and I think when we lost track, I said that to me that's one of the scenes that sticks out the most in the movie because it really we were talking about the cult, and you go, they really seem like nice people, and that's what it's like they kill people, yeah, but they seem like nice people, like you said, they raise orphans, and and that's where that scene is what hits home to me because they try to share in her grief.
Yes. And they do share in everybody's grief because they do that in probably the most shocking scene, I would say, of the whole movie is and I'm gonna try to pronounce this, but I'm probably gonna mispronounce it, Adastupa.
Yeah.
Where they basically they have what do we say? I'm sorry, did you have a thought to finish there? I'm sorry.
No. I was just going on about the group. So yeah, no, the elder suicide essentially. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so which apparently is a real thing.
Yes.
But they haven't practiced it nobody's done it in a really, really, really long time. And apparently it was usually due to like financial strain or like lack of supplies for the group. But basically, but honestly, they totally talk about this, and this is a weird reference, but have you ever seen it's like live action, but it's puppets, Dinosaurs from the 90s?
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's a whole episode where like the grandma is going to go to the tar pits, and I don't know if she does in the end, but basically it's like old people, instead of just dying of natural causes, they jump off a cliff and commit suicide.
You actually have that. You have that in different cultures around the world. I forgot the Japanese word for it, but the Japanese, it was an ancient thing. They don't do it anymore, very obviously. But you would abandon your elders in the wilderness, and it was to help the family. And so, I mean, I think the idea of this, I don't know. It's very interesting to see the Asian aspect of abandonment versus, I guess, our Europeans, where it's actual suicide, where they essentially take their lives into their own hands, is very interesting.
Yeah. So there's the weirdest part of it. This is probably the worst part, because if you're watching the movie, they don't really hint that that's going to happen unless you happen to know Swedish and you know what Adastupa means. But I can't remember his name, but the friend who is the anthropology major who Christian piggybacks on is it like Josh or something? It might be Josh.
I know you're talking about the actor who plays Chidi in The Good Place too.
Yes, and I cannot remember the character's name though. But he knows what's gonna happen because they're like, oh, hey, what's happening tomorrow? And Pele tells him it in Swedish, and then he doesn't tell anybody. He's like, oh, you'll just have to wait and see. And I'm like, why did he not tell anybody? Is it because he's just sick and twisted? And his name is Josh. I had to IMDb it. It is Josh. Thank God I remembered it, because I was like, I don't know if I remember it. Anyways, so Josh knows what's going to happen. Pele knows what's going to happen. And then Pele's brother, who brought the British people, what is his name? Not Ulf, but what is his name? Inga.
Yeah.
No, not Inga. Maybe, I don't know. His brother also knows what's going to happen, but doesn't tell anybody. And they just they all go out to this cliff, and the old people they cut their hands and they put their blood on a rock, and then they just jump off a cliff, and the first person does it and she dies instantly, which is the goal, and everyone's fine with it except for all the tourists, who are all freaking out, because who wouldn't freak out if you just saw someone jump to their death? Like, that's horrifying. And they're trying to explain it to them, and one of them screams when the second person jumps, and it kind of distracts him and he misses the mark, and then they have to beat his head with a giant hammer.
Yes.
And it's awful. And it's very realistic gore, and it is extremely graphic, and it is hard. I mean, I don't know, I couldn't stop looking at it because it was so horrifying. But then once that happens, there's worse stuff that happens in the rest of the movie. But because that's so shocking, I think most people it's kind of like Hereditary with the little girl getting decapitated. You're like, okay, we're at this point. But then it kind of quiets down for a little bit, because then people just start disappearing. And they keep making up excuses. Like the British couple is like, we're going to leave. And then like the boyfriend leaves without the girlfriend. And the girl's like, why the fuck did he leave without me? And then she disappears. And they're like, I guess they both found a ride. And everyone keeps making up. All the cult people are like, oh yeah, we got her back to the train station. You're like, oh, okay. And then, because I mean, who thinks, oh, my friends disappeared, they must have been ritualistically murdered by a cult? Like, you don't want to go into it anything thinking that. So they do it so well, and they're such friendly people. You're like, of course. And then the Josh gets hit over the head because he's sneaking into, like, there's like a sacred text that they're like, you can see it, but please do not take a photograph of this. It is very sacred to us. And he sneaks in and takes a photo anyways, because he obviously doesn't respect anybody. And somebody is wearing his friend Mark's face, a la Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and hits him over the head. And that was another funny thing. Funny, ironic, because Mark accidentally pees on an ancestral tree. Like, basically, they burn their dead, and they put all their ashes on this tree that's dead. It's like a giant dead tree that like plants are growing on, and he pees on it because he doesn't know. And then there's a guy that keeps looking at him, and he tells his friend, he's like, that guy's gonna kill me for peeing on the tree. And apparently that is the guy that kills him in the mask. So like, yeah, he actually does. Everything people say is gonna happen, like, as a joke, it actually happens. And like the redheaded girl, there's also the tapestry thing. There's a second tapestry in this thing. There's a lot of like symbols, like there's like everything's decorated in these really pretty paintings. And like there's a bear on fire, and that's how Christian dies. He dies in a bear suit and a fire. And then there's this tapestry of this girl. Oh, it's really gross. Cutting her pubic hair, putting it in a pie, then taking menstrual blood, putting it in a drink, and feeding both of them to someone she loves. And then he falls in love with her, and they have sex. There's a tapestry of that. Yeah, that's what happens to Christian and the redheaded girl.
It's shown backwards too. So when you're looking at the images, you have no idea what you're looking at. You're like, okay, this is weird. Is that a vagina? And then it's like, but you go back and watch it a second time, and you're like, holy shit, that's literally what happens.
Oh, I know. I got the tapestry the first time. I don't know I don't know why, but I was just like, oh, that's gross. I'm like, and I was like, I bet that's what that creepy little redheaded girl's gonna do. For some reason. I don't know why. Everything else I had to rewatch and see, but for some reason that was one of the things that I was like, oh, that's definitely what's going to happen. Because that I can see that little girl looks like a creepy. She looks like, you know, in Harry Potter where, I can't remember which girl it is, but when the girls start trying to give Ron love potions, like, she gave me that vibe. Like, you can try to, like, trick somebody into loving you because you're crazy. Also, again, she's 15, and also, I don't know why. The first time this didn't really bother me. I think I didn't realize what they said the first time. But the second time I watched it, Pele's like, oh, that's Maya. And she just hit the age of you're allowed to have sex. Not she wants to date you. She's now allowed to have sex. Yeah. So their whole community seems so open and welcoming and free. But they're actually extremely rigid in their rules. Like, until the age of 18, you're a child. After 18 until I think it's like 36, you're a young adult. 36 to 54, you're a working adult. And then from 54 to 72, I think, you are an elderly person. So like, it's very structured. They control when you have sex. Christian has to have a meeting with the elder before he has sex with Maya. Like, it's very, like, it's like all there, but they show you it so smoothly and slowly that you can understand why Danny falls for them. And it really is, it's supposed to be, apparently the original script was presented to Ari Aster. Like, I don't think he wrote the original script, like the first treatment. It was just like the horror movie aspect of this pagan cult in this beautiful summer. Like, there's never any darkness, so everything's in bright full sunlight. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's flowers everywhere. And when Danny gets closer to nature, like the flowers start like breathing with her and stuff. So it's like this oneness, like she's becoming one with the cult and life and everything. It's very beautiful. But he added this whole relationship breaking down metaphor, and it's very similar to Hereditary because that's a metaphor for grief. This is a metaphor for a relationship falling apart, and apparently he had gone through an ugly breakup before this.
Yes.
And so they fight. Like, I don't know. I mean, the relationship I'm in hasn't fallen apart, but I have had fights in tough times where it's just these, like, you're trying to have a conversation, but then, like, you just, like, give up because you don't want to fight because you don't want to, like, cause a breakup. But then, like, you should just, like, honestly, if you want to talk about something with your partner, you should just come out and say it, because, like, they have these, like, you know, Dane Cook said it best, nothing fights, where they just start fighting about stuff, but they're not really, like, fighting. And then she's like, oh, never mind. I didn't mean to, like, do that. And you're like, no, girl, stand up for yourself. Because, like, if you're in a relationship where you can't, like, just fight about something, then it's not a good relationship. And also, like, he forgets her birthday.
Yeah, and she picks flowers for him on her birthday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like, she's doing that thing where, like, I don't know, she's like, oh, I didn't remind him, and Pele, like, draws her this beautiful picture of her.
Okay, so right at this point, we got some really bad news that the writer of Stacy's mom from the band Fountains of Wayne had actually passed away due to COVID-19, and we kind of got derailed about talking about COVID-19, and just in an effort to make this a little bit shorter than, like, the original 2 or 3 hours we recorded, we are putting it on a separate bonus episode, as well as, like, a getting to know you episode because of that. So anyways, here's the rest of the Midsommar conversation.
And on that note, I actually gotta get ready to go, Katie. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Can we, like, wrap it up real quick and just say sorry to change the thing, but Midsommar is a very good movie.
Yes.
You should definitely watch it.
It is. Midsommar and Hereditary are one of those movies that I feel like, horror movie fan, you have to see them, because they're going to be part of the cultural horror lexicon, and you're going to hear them get brought up. And if you're not in the know-how, you're going to miss out on a lot of really great conversations because of that. And Ari Aster is on his way to becoming what I'm sure will be a legendary horror maker. So you gotta watch it, guys. They're wonderful movies.
They are. They're very well made, and surprisingly, I mean, he picks a lot of female-driven drama, and I think that's something we don't see a lot. I mean, I think we're seeing it more, but traditionally, a lot of women in horror movies kind of get a victim role, and they're a lot more dynamic in his movies, and that's very rare. But he doesn't do it. I don't know. There's a fine line between having a dynamic female role and just being like, oh, I just put a girl in this so I seem cooler. You know, I'm just, a little SJW overkill. But this is very much earned and rewarded, and it makes sense. And surprisingly, he's a guy. Like, I mean, no offense to guys, but you don't always get guys that will put a woman in a lead role. And I mean, I think it is saying something that a man can direct a movie that is very positive, feminist. I don't want to call it feminist, but, like, female driven. A very positive female driven movie. Like, men can do that. You don't have to only have women direct other women and have a powerful female cast. We gotta stick together. But yeah, on that note, we do have to go because unfortunately we just got interrupted by our technology stopping, so it kind of took us longer to start recording than we thought it was going to. So thanks for listening.
Yes, definitely. And that's the thing. I was like, are they going to listen to a 3-hour podcast?
Probably not. I'm probably going to edit some of this. I'm going to try to edit it so some of it is a little more. I'm going to try to knock it down to an hour, whether we have to do 2 parts or 1 part. And I think, Brittany, we'll probably try to record. I don't know what your schedule is, but if we can record another one next week or even 2 next week.
Yeah.
Because, I want to release like 3 at a time, because I know if people like this, I know what I do when I like a podcast or a YouTube channel, I binge watch them. So I'm going to try to wait until we have like 3 set up to actually put it out. But I want to do it so people can listen to it while they're at home in isolation, because we might have all listened to our own podcasts. I know I've listened to pretty much every My Favorite Murder that exists now. So I'm about to run out of podcasts myself. So, I've done some backlogging. Crime Junkie, I've already listened. So I'm like, I need some new ones. So hopefully we will have some new ones for you. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you see a good movie this week. Okay?
Yes. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care.